Mr. Plunce here. We are checking out solving quadratic equations. This is enriched geometry, so hopefully some of this stuff is a little bit familiar and some of it might be new. So we'll see what happens. All right, first of all, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 9 could be plus or minus 3, but that's not the definition. The definition says what two positive numbers can you multiply together to get 9. So the answer is just 3, not plus or minus 3. Okay, 3 squared equals 9. Negative 3 squared means negative 3 times negative 3, which is also 9. Now, solve by guess and check. Okay, what two numbers can you square and get 9? Well, clearly 3 and negative 3 both work. Now, what algebraic steps give us this answer? Now, here's where things get a little crazy. Okay, so we have the problem x squared equals 9. Now, the opposite of squaring is square rooting. So I will take the square root of both sides. Now, on the left side, the square root and the square cancel, and you're left with just x. Now, on the right side, the square root of 9 is 3. But we just said this wasn't the full answer. 3 is one of our answers, but so is negative 3. Where does the negative 3 come from? It comes from the left side. A plus or minus squared both equal 9. So from the left side, you get a plus or a minus, and that looks bad. Let me see if I can make that look a little better. Plus or minus. Now I'm happy. Okay, so we're going to solve the next problems by taking the square root of both sides. And don't forget about the plus or minus. Okay. So the first one, square root of both sides, squared and the square cancel. X equals, the square root of 25 is 5, but the plus or minus magically pops up from the left side. So don't forget that. That's a very common thing to forget on a test. Quite a few of you will probably forget that. Okay, the next problem. We could take the square root of both sides right now, but that would be a little crazy because the 12 is on the wrong side of the equation. So we will just add 12 to both sides. Now we have x squared equals 12. Now we will square root both sides, not forgetting the plus or minus. And the square root of 12 does not have a nice square root. But let's see if we can simplify it. We tried that on the last worksheet. All right. 6 times 2 is 12, but 4 times 3 is also 12, and that works better. So now we get plus or minus 2 square root of 3 as the final answer. Okay, let's try the next one. Okay, we could square root both sides now, but it's much easier to subtract 4 first. So you get x minus 3 squared equals 36. Now that the square root's by itself, we will square root both sides. So we get x minus 3 equals. Now, I didn't need that parenthesis. Now, don't forget the plus or minus. And the square root of 36 is 6. Now, to solve for x, we will add 3 to both sides. So we get x equals positive 6 plus 3, which is 9, and negative 6 plus 3, which is negative 3. Okay, so far so good. Let me know if you have any questions. Maybe not right now, but at some point we can talk on Google Meet. Okay, the next problem, 2x squared equals 18. Okay, this one. Like I said before, you could square root both sides right away, but that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. So the square root of 2, we don't know quite what that is. The square root and the square will cancel for the x. We can split it up like this. The square root of 18 is, let's see. I'll just leave it the square root of 18. Now, the square root of the square cancel. Don't forget the plus or minus. Divide by the square root of 2. So you get x equals plus or minus, now that cancels. The square root of 18 divided by the square root of 2 is the same as 18 over 2, which is 9. And the square root of 9 is then 3. So this one we did the hard way. Don't do things the hard way. The easy way is get the thing that's squared by itself. So x squared equals 9 square root. This was the easy way, getting the square root, the thing that's squared by itself. Okay. Now, let's square root both sides on this one. Now we get x equals plus or minus the square root of 2x. There's an x on both sides, and we are stuck. This is bad. Okay, so square rooting both sides doesn't always work to solve a problem. Okay, here is how we could solve it, an alternate method. Okay, we will subtract 2x from both sides. We will get x squared minus 2x equals 0. Now, another thing we can do is solve by factoring. We just practiced factoring not too long ago. I believe that was on the first worksheet, Q1. Okay, what we could do is factor out an x. We're left with x minus 2. Now, if this part was 0, we'd be happy because 0 times any number is 0. If this part were 0, we'd also be happy because x equals 2, because any number times 0 is 0. So our answers are 0 and, what was I writing there? We could add 2 to both sides. 0 and 2 are our answers. So square rooting both sides doesn't work if there's an x term. This is when it doesn't work. Okay, so these problems we can solve by factoring. All right, so let's think back to factoring. See if we can factor this. X times x is x squared. And 6 times 1 is 6. This looks promising. If I have a negative 6 and a positive 1, I'll get the negative 5 as a middle term. Oh, but wait. A negative 6 times a positive 1, that's a negative 6. This doesn't work. Oh no, I have to give up and try different numbers. 6 and 1 didn't work. So let's try 3 and 2. Now, what if I made these both negatives? Then a negative times a negative is a positive, and a negative 3x and a negative 2x is a negative 5x. Now we've solved the puzzle. Now, to finish solving it, 0 times any number is 0. So what would make this part 0? X minus 3. What would make this part 0? 3. What would make this part 0 is 2. So 3 and 2 are our answers. Okay, so when you solve by factoring, you want it equal to 0. So this problem, taking the square root of both sides, won't work because there's this x term. So we could try taking the square root of both sides, but we'll just get stuck. So instead, we'll set it equal to 0. X squared plus 11x plus 18 equals 0. And now we'll try to solve it by factoring. And if this doesn't work, we have to give up because we only know two methods. Maybe there's another method floating around out there somewhere that I could figure out. So if factoring doesn't work, we have to give up and say it's not solvable. But maybe there's another method that I can figure out and teach you on the next worksheet. We'll see what happens. X times x is x squared. 6 times 3 is 18, but so is 9 times 2, which looks much more promising because 9x and 2x is the 11x. So what makes this part 0? -9. And what makes this part 0 is -2. And we've done it. Notice that all of these problems have two answers. Okay, so these are our two favorite methods, square rooting both sides and factoring. See if those methods work down here. I believe all of these problems are solvable by one of the two methods. So good luck, and we'll talk to you soon if you have any questions. Signing off for now. Goodbye. This is Mr. Pluntz signing out for now. Good luck.